I would like to warmly welcome two representatives of the Society of Eritrean think tank to the Protestant Academy to Berlin today. It is a great pleasure that you have time today also to share your ideas and project with us. And what we want to do the next hour is to talk about what a future democratic Eritrea can look like. And so I will start with the first question. If you can tell us how the initiative to found the Society of Eritrean Think Tank came about.
Thank you very much indeed, Oliver. Permit us to thank you for your thoughtfulness and generosity, and for having opened up the possibility for us to express our views, especially by focusing on the idea of government in exile through the principles of strategy Addi. The idea of the strategy Addi and government in exile, in the end, were embodied in the concept of a think tank which would be able to empower the Eritrean people to create their own national assembly in exile, so that with this possibility they could establish their own government in exile, based on their traditional addis or communes and districts and counties. At the beginning, there was a great deal of confusion, that people did not know which government is likely to stand behind such an organization. And it took us many years to explain to them that we are the beneficiaries of the modern forms of communication, social communication, one of which is actually the Zoom, as if it was specifically invented for our benefit. So the government is in exile. The set or the think tank is a civil society and not a political one. The civil society established no less than 5-6 documents and discussed it with the Eritrean people intensively for the past 4 years through in written form and in educational sound form, and also virtually through various forms of the social media. And once the idea was accepted, there emerged organizations which accept the idea of having some kind of parliament, but on the other hand, they refuse to accept that it should be based on the traditional ideas, that is communes, districts, and the 9 counties of Eritrea. And in fact, this very minute, there is a meeting in a Zoom meeting trying to avoid creating an assembly in exile on the basis of the original roots of the Eritrean people, but based on neighborhood principles in the diaspora, which is, there are so many other non-Eritreans who in the name of Eritreans have registered with with what we call the host countries in Europe and the United States. So we want to make sure that this parliament is based, in fact, on Eritrean origins and nationhood, because the strategy ADI is the basis of Eritrean nationhood, which I'll discuss this point at a later stage. And I would like to ask Freweyni to add, to refine, to embellish the short remarks that I have made.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for inviting us again. It looks like we have a safe base in the Evangelical Academy to Berlin, where we can share our ideas. Thank you for being a good friend. And thank you, Tegadalai Herui, for the introduction. The Society of Eritrean Think Tank has decided to empower Eritrean people to form their own diaspora or exile government, because the government in Eritrea doesn't represent the Eritrean people in Eritrea, and neither the Eritrean people in the diaspora. The only countable thing that this government in Eritrea is doing is producing refugees and producing military generations, one after the other. So by trying to build a government in exile, we are trying to do 2 to 3 things. One, to gather together on a traditional base, which Tegadalai Herui is probably going to go deeper into how ADI's strategy for ADI is organized, but at the same time to avoid also competition, unnecessary competitions and disputes between the Eritrean diaspora on ideology or political diversity. First, to gather all Eritreans in the diaspora to build their own representative as an assembly where diverse political ideas can come together. But first, we have to have a safe country where people can call a home. So with this, everything that Eritreans in the diaspora have been trying to do is by building political organizations, civic societies, and so on, that never succeeded in coming together. So we think this traditional strategy, ADI, is rooted deep into the ideas and genes and experiences of the Eritrean people, and it has functioned for so many years and so many centuries that is the structure on which we can come together and be ethnically different, religious different, and in many speaking different languages and having different experience, even political diverse ideologies. As Eritreans, we all belong to Eritrea, and we all have a share to this nation, and we all should have a say in that. So with this idea, we also need to have people representing the diaspora and be also a voice for those voiceless in Eritrea. And after trying so many different aspects, this position of the Eritrean think tank is hopefully going to gather all diverse Eritreans in the diaspora and also become approachable for every friend that is willing to support Eritreans in their struggle for freedom and for justice. which means we would then be able to have what we call a government in exile that can be addressed by the United States, nations, and by the governments of all nations of the world.
Yeah, thank you for the first impressions, what you're doing or what you want to do. Both of you, you mentioned the ADI system now, and maybe that would be, I think, because it's kind of, as I understood it here, it's the basic structure, it's the basic idea a lot of people share. But I think it would be now very important also to explain it to non-Eritrean people to understand it actually, what the ADI system is and how we can understand it. So
the ADI system, ADI integrate and add in integrate and ADI integrinya signify an organized community. The difference, for example, between us and our neighbors is that land is owned at the level of ADIs. Land is not owned by the state, not by the district, not by the counties, not by the state. Land belongs to the ADI community. That's very important because it prevents land grabbing. It prevents the spread of shanty towns, as we have witnessed in many African modern cities, post-World War cities, like in South Africa, for example. Because only ADI people can build houses in their own environs, possibly in the higher parts of that ADI, particular ADI, and they farm for their survival in that ADI, and therefore they can also, through the ADI system, fight against mass starvation, because they do not have to await the decisions of a central government in order to have at least one meal a day. And it prevents also leaving your land to seek livelihood outside your own ADI, because you can provide your own food and the other ADIs provide their own food. And the system is such that even if you accept neighbors to live in that country, the possibility of becoming citizens, that's the second point. Not only is the land based on ADI, citizenship is also based on ADI. So one doesn't become an Eritrean due to what the state has determined, but one becomes an Eritrean by being a member of the commune. So the question is, from which ADI do you come, Oliver? And if you say ADI X, the next question is, that's the citizenship, whose son are you? So we know, it's a packet. One of the things that the dictator in Eritrea has done is what the Italians and even the Ethiopians have never dared to do. He has started plundering the ADIs of Eritrea, and that's why we call him and his group, the group which is ruling, as Marinos. These are the ADI-less people who came during the Italians, and many of them also when Haile Selassie became emperor, and Eritrea was a semi-colony of his, because he transformed it into a province like the other provinces of Ethiopia. And so the others followed from Ethiopia, even Tigrinya speakers. And the president's generation, he's probably a third, fourth generation Eritrean, but the whole group identifies itself as Tigrayan, like, for example, ethnic groups when Yugoslavia splintered into several entities. Those who lived in exile, for example, Sweden, the Yugoslavs, they started organizing themselves, and eventually they were criminalized, many of them. Yeah. And probably when we discuss later in another meeting, the question of what is happening to Eritrean refugees in Europe, for example, because this is where we live, we will take up this issue again and try to refine it somehow and probably make useful ideas and come up with useful solutions. And one of the reasons why we insist that the parliament in exile, before the government in exile, must be identifiable members of the Addi, the principle, where do you come from, Oliver, even in exile in the diaspora. Because there is such a large number of Eritreans in Europe, for example, that a close relationship between European authorities and Eritrean refugee committees is so important for many, many things. Some of these things are actually matters related to law and order, peace, maybe, and to try to develop the refugees as useful citizens of the communities in which they live, the host countries. And another thing which is really fascinating is that why did the Addi system develop in a small country like Eritrea and did not in, for example, the Sudan or Ethiopia? In Ethiopia, they developed a massive, what they call feudal system. I'm not sure whether it is strictly scientifically a feudal society, but anyway, let's say so. And so they have the grand constitution, which we mentioned in our previous meeting with you, Oliver, and which was more than a constitution. It became actually the invention of the Ethiopian people. I mean, sometimes we can point a finger and say the Grand Constitution, Kibre Negest, is merely a mythology and does not represent historical facts. But it seems that mythologies can actually attain their own historical facts through the dynamics and the strength of the mythology itself. But if we take, for example, not only the rulers and the polity, but we take also the execution of the system of justice at the village, at the level, the village elects its own representatives and it has a committee and it summons the committee whenever there are problems. And the so-called hegigen dabba, the legal charters of these addis, it's actually very advanced. They have their own written charts, more or less like the kings of Normandy when they started spreading the idea of ordered state and society. The charters make sure that whenever there is a judgment, the judgment must not punish the so-called guilty person too heavily, because it will be a perpetuation of conflict in society, from the individual directly to the families, and eventually in the commune society, and probably civil war in the end. So all crimes short of murder or assassination were more or less equal, but the guilty one has to pay in kind. In other words, he is not hanged by the neck until he is dead, but he probably has to offer his beautiful daughter to the sons of, let's say, the deceased, or some edible material, and the like, without going into unnecessary details now. So in actual fact, the idea of social justice is inbuilt in the charters of the Adi. So all the provinces of Eritrea have their own Hegendabat, which is their own charter constitutions as instruments of ordering society. They might vary from place to place, but in the end, the rights of women are protected strictly, and so are the rights of animals. Even the donkey, which is probably the lowest being in the community Adi, is also appreciated, because a wounded donkey is not allowed, is not allowed to burden him as a beast of burden unless he is in good health. And so it is a civilizing community. In other words, we have so much respect for the law that any citizen can stop me in the street by saying, in the name of the law. He can stop me at any time in the presence of witnesses, neighbors, and so on. He says, in the name of law, I request that you stand where you stand now. Don't move. And I believe this is actually extremely charming, because then we may not have to arm the police to do that. It is inculcated in the, shall we say, pillars of values of the Adi community. I would like to continue later, but instead of having a monologue, it is always beautiful to share the word with my partner here, Freweyni.
I could go on listening to you.
Thank you, Dr.
It's so
Oliver.
fascinating. Thank you so much.
If you do not want to add something, I maybe have two questions to the Adi system. Is that okay? Or do you want to add, Freweyni, something?
Maybe I can answer them then.
Yeah.
Try. Go on.
I think it was really interesting to get these insights, and really also well explained, actually. And as I got it, it's of course there's a shift in property, there's a shift in citizenship that is quite different to our state or nation state model, actually. And maybe I have two, or and what I think is also very interesting was the last chapter you told us about the legal system, about it. It's actually a different kind of morality, I think, within this Adi system, and I think that is interesting, because it's kind of the recognition or acceptance of a life of the others. Yeah, is very incorporated in the system. But maybe I have two two questions. You mentioned it as also a space or as fundamental aspect to unite the diaspora, refugees, the Eritrean people living in exile. And there, my first question would be, is there a kind of awareness for the ADI system? Do they know it, or do you have to actually um, do we need some kind of workshops? Do we need some kind of conferences to spread actually the knowledge about the ADI system? That would be my first question. And then you mentioned also we have different ADIs locals, and I was wondering how they are connected. If there is maybe an umbrella structure or something.
That's
That are
right.
my two questions.
Yeah. Freweyni,
Shall I try?
go ahead, please.
Yeah. It's really fascinating because it shows how deeply rooted, law-obeying, civilized society the Eritrean people are. And with your question, actually, you are tackling one of the central point, because the difficulties we have to speed up, because it's very urgent. We have many, many Eritreans all over the world in a very miserable situation. And we think it's actually very urgent. And at the same time, we have a generation, or actually generations, that have got detached from this culture in a way. But at the same time, what is fascinating for me is to observe how they practice it without knowing they are part of this culture. So when they connect the young generation abroad, the new refugees that arrived since 2014, for instance, since the social media is very helpful for connecting, the way they socialize, the way they connect is actually, when it comes to basic needs they have, it's based on ADI system. When they celebrate, it can be baptism, marriage, weddings. It can be celebrating their church. It could be Michael's church of the village, or Gabriel's church of the village. So when they gather to celebrate, even family celebrations of individual families, when they invite their people from the community, which means the connection all over the world is close and strong. And it's a network that functions. That's how they survive, how people survive in these very difficult, challenging times. So they do practice it, they do have these networks, but at the same time, to politicize it and to make it to, let's say, a system to which we can go back and build our government in exile, or build future Eritrea. That is disrupted by the revolution we had for independence of Eritrea for 30 years. And the 30 years after the revolution, after the so-called independence. What I mean is, during the revolution, the organizations that fought for independence, they had more socialist ideas. And they all sacrificed their lives and canceled identities of villages, or communities, or families, or belonging to anything, or religion. They kind of canceled, and they became one, sacrifice heroes for the nation. So the nation building started there in a different, to take a different direction. And since it lasted so long, for 30 years, it became this new Eritrea idea to build a nation of one people, and eliminating sort of the diversity we have, became a dangerous unifying aspect, but to the disadvantage of the Eritrean people. And after the independence, the regime even dared, like Tagada Lehori was saying, none of the colonial powers ever dared to destruct this very deep structure in which the Eritrean people were living. Even the Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian regime, not even dared the socialist system for 17 years. So altogether, it's our own so-called government that knows that the strength of the people is based on this structure, because it's not based on ethnic, it's not based on religion, it's not based on blood, it's not based on this, but land and people and communes. And the land belongs to the people, and the land is not owned by individuals or families, but by the commune, which is inherited to the next generation. This strength, he destructed it by restructuring the 9 different regions with their own laws, their own bylaws. They are similar, but at the same time, they diverse. They have diverse, how do you say, different aspects as well. And if I was going to read you the names of the 9 regions, we have Akologuzai, Barka, Dankalia, Gashbarka, Hamasin, Sahel, Samhar, Sanhit, and Sarai. And they all have their own communal land, clear borders, and at the same time, their own laws, and all have diverse people of ethnicity and religion and language. And they lived peacefully for many, many years until this government or this regime destructed all this system and relocated people from one area to another, and intermixing and creating a so-called new nation. And at the same time, without people understanding it, making the whole country, the whole land, to a property of the nation, meaning the government. So at the moment, it is officially declared the land belongs to the government, to the state, which is absolutely the opposite of what we had by our forefathers. And the bylaws, like Tagada Lehori was saying, it is the highest quality of respecting life, even baby before it's born, the rights of a child, the rights of a woman, the rights of each individual, the rights of guests, the rights of the integration of newcomers with a certain limited time, and the way you treat land, meaning ecological aspects, and no police, no prison, but conflict resolution methods that functioned. All this needs to be looked up closely. And since your question was, do we need workshops? Oh yes, we need workshops with our own people. And we also need to explain the world. So I think the world needs to copy this. So no millionaires and milliardaires occupy the world and people are sleeping on the street.
Yeah.
I will add a few points. Dr. Oliver, are you with me? Hello?
Yeah, I hear you. Everything fine. You can add everything.
Thank you. Yes, the community outside, we have the highly educated, and we have the victims of the dictatorship who, since independence, the moment they feel 18, they are ordered to go and join the army at Sawa. Continuously. Let's say we were 4 million, And now nobody is certain that there are more than a million and a half Eritreans working, falling in love, getting married, and producing children. Everyone goes directly to the army. Such a situation, actually, I don't think you have read them in any kind of saga. It's out of this world.
Mm.
And one of the reasons why we want to talk to our European friends than Eritreans we have done for 22 years now, almost 3, since we evolved the idea of strategy Adi and government in exile. The first to accept it were our Ethiopian friends and our Yemeni friends and our Sudanese friends who accepted the idea of government in exile. And the 3 governments were ready to support us in all forms of support, from the military to scholarships to whatever that would enable us to uproot the dictatorial system in our country, Eritrea. But once whom we call Asmarinos, in other words, they are the Eritreans who came from various provinces of Ethiopia. And during the struggle, they took over political power through the Liberation Organization, the TPLF. They made sure that many of the most important and courageous thinkers who made up the EPLF were destroyed in their prisons, massacred. Some we know, some we do not know. And now the remaining probably there are about 9 personalities, and all of them, almost all of them, are Asmarinos. None of them is a member of the Eritrean Addis. So it is a very unique situation we are facing. It is a dictatorship, yes. It's a mafia organizations, yes. What else? They are Asmarinos. What is Eritrea to them? And the second problem facing us is that when we started organizing the opposition to the regime in Asmara, persons who made themselves as if they were the opposition started taking over the role of the opposition, minimizing the importance of the role of the opposition, splitting them, buying some of them, creating havoc and confusion in the diaspora so that Eritreans cannot think together and create a unified leadership. They are very often called behind the lines opposition. They started their career as opponents to Isaias, but they were behind the lines. But now they have started opposing for good. They started their careers as behind the lines. But now that they see that things are not going well in Asmara, they said, why don't we create a new image for ourselves, that we become that power which takes over from Isaias. And so they say, no, government in exile is dangerous, because government in the exile is peaceful. They want to cut off our conversation with Europe. Even Italy In my generation, we grew up speaking Italian. Of course, they were colonizers, but we don't think of them as colonizers, you know? And that's where our international politics was focused when we started that while we were at the opposition in Addis Ababa, when we had the Eritrean government in exile. And do you know what happened? Behind the lines won. Some of them were in the business of raising money for the armed struggle, and they had contacts in Europe. The Green Party in Germany actually was a lackey of the so-called behind the lines. And they stopped the opposition, confused, created, you know. And, but we are neck and neck now. And we are saying our conversation with Eritreans is fantastic as it has been for the past 22, 23 years. But now we want to talk to Europeans. We want to talk with Europeans.
Yeah.
And I agree with Freweyni that we need, of course, workshops and so on. Workshops are always good. But we are fighters for independence. And so the most important for us is to the think tank is a civil society organization. But the political one, which I lead, the program is a strategy ADI. So in order that it may not be regarded as a political program for the think tank, we call it the principles of the ADI. So when we talk about the strategy ADI, we are talking about the party to which I belong. When we talk about the principles of ADI, we are talking about empowering the Eritrean people to create their own parliament. That's the first thing. Then after that, after we create our parliament, we are going to need actually secondary schools through, of course, the social media. I think it is helping us a great deal, the social media, especially Zoom. We need at least a university college, I think. We start with one secondary school or two, one university, so that youth is not wasted, so that the youth in Germany begin to imbibe knowledge just as German children are imbibing children, or Swedish children, for example, are imbibing knowledge. That the young Eritreans are not pushed to the wrong path, which is the path of gangsterism, and so on. But that comes later. Aujourd'hui, today, as it is what we need is the politics of government in exile. That's what we need. We want to shorten the life of Asmarinos and their cohorts in the diaspora so that the Eritrean people can live in peace with itself and with its neighbors.
Yeah.
I thank you so much.
Yeah, it was really impressive what you told us. Maybe what I take with me now was to kind. You need the contact of course there must be a politicization, there must be this government in exile, there must be the parliament. Maybe we can also briefly talk about the idea how the parliament could look like, because when we have the ADI system or this principle of ADI, you know, Europeans always thinking about political parties that are left and right. And we talked about that. You said that's quite different, maybe. Maybe we can talk about that. And then the second point you said is also contact actually to politicians, to European politicians and to other politicians, also to empower. And of course, you said it at the beginning, to institutions like the United Nations. That would be, I think, quite important also to be acknowledged as a big movement on the one hand side, and as a political actor actually, and as a collective political actor on the other hand side. I think this is very important. But maybe we can briefly go to the idea of parliament. So and you can go into more detail.
Thank you. Freweyni, would you allow me to
Yes.
to extend the possibility for me to explain actually the role of logic? I think we Eritreans are going to be forced to think. Very often we get 2 or 3 PhDs, not necessarily by thinking, but by, I don't know, memorizing what they teach us in the PhD courses. But now we have so many fighters who fought for their lives, not only academics. And so I believe the possibility to think actually exists. In my experience, while the majority of youth of my generation, up to the generations of independence, became fighters, a few of these decided to become academics, and they think because the fighters are getting old, some of them are the age of the present Prime Minister of Eritrea. Well, the question of age has been politicized, and therefore they do not wish to have a new discussion about democracy regarding our country, for example. In other words, if land belongs, actually, the sustenance of life belongs to the Adi. If the roofs over our houses are provided by the hills and mountains of the Addis, and all other facilities, including our life sustenance, is provided by the Addis, then the economic system of the Addis, the PhDs tell us that, okay, we let the families who own the land of the Addis to share it between themselves. But that would be 3 or 4 kilos per person if we do that. That is a foolish owner of a PhD. It means that this guy has never been fighting for his country. He may have been fighting for himself. He was probably thinking, okay, I'll go to my country, my Addi, my community, and then get my piece of land. Who is going to live in the rural areas of Eritrea? I'll just sell it and go. In essence, what does it mean? He will take with him 3-4 kilos of earth. What should be done in our program is to transform the land which is owned by the inhabitants of the Addis into shareholders. So it becomes like a cow which is continuously providing milk to the children who are growing. In other words, this is development. On the other hand, the democracy is also from the bottom, which is the Addi. It's very easy because citizenship is there, land is there. So the infrastructure and the superstructure itself, which is the state, is not needed because the people are doing much of what the state does in nation states. So it's going to be a lot of society building and a minimalized state building. This is what we say in our party. Build the society, build a person, make him a great human being. Let him learn to speak Chinese.
Yeah.
Less of the state and its bureaucrats. Unfortunately, we have the assembly, Baito, at the community level. We have Baitos also at the district level. And the Eritrean Baito, the Eritrean parliament, by the way, took the name Baito, the ancestral Baito. And it was, when my father was prime minister, it was called the Eritrean Baito. It was an extension of the village Baito, not a derivative of the heavy state. That is very important indeed. And second thing, parties were created in Europe because the Industrial Revolution was so powerful and so dynamic that it split, the highly developed European countries and later the United States and Australia into those who owned masses of facilities for whom it was possible to manipulate to their advantage, and the working classes. So they needed political parties to represent them, to fight for their interests, and so to capture the state if possible. But in the case of Eritrea, says our party, which is called, by the way, the Cooperative Party, advocates in the cities, maybe political parties. That's what we say. We'll fight for this idea. We'll try to convince our co-nationals that this is the thing for you. In the cities, the industrial areas, may be political parties, because political parties are the results of the class division associated with the Industrial Revolution. But in the communities, no political parties.
Yeah. It's highly different to our system. That is an interesting point.
Maybe, Dr. Oliver, this may need a workshop.
Yeah, sure. Also for the Europeans, actually, or people in Germany, because yeah, it's always interesting because when I'm teaching at the university and I also taught some courses on Rojava and this Kurdish idea of a different kind of how it's called, democratic confederalism. It is also quite different. It's similar. You have the communes, you have a different kind of participating in decisions, you have a different kind of legal system. As you also said, you do not need the prisons actually, because you have a different kind of morality in the society. And I think this idea is also quite important for us in Europe to learn about, actually, a different kind, how to build up a different kind of morality and how it is connected, actually. And I think that was really, really nicely explained in your presentations now, but it is always connected to what kind of property rights we have and what kind of citizenship rights we have, where citizenship comes from. And for this reason, of course, it needs another workshop, and also it needs another conference. But I think the more, the more interesting and more important thing is to...
Anyway, the Cooperative Party, Dr. Oliver,
Yeah.
From small beginnings,
Yeah.
in the end, it is the big which make small things as big as they are.
Yeah.
We have no pretensions. We have no pretensions. But we wish that we are wise enough to choose our friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so today we may need the help of our friends. And tomorrow we will pay it back, not from a cynical point of view, but from the point of view, okay, we have to help each other, why not? Sort of thing. And a country like Europe, in the present situation, has to renew or reinvent its relationship to Africa, I think, Europe. Of course, the Middle East is important. All the countries, all the continents are important. But countries, mighty countries like Germany, that's why we can never teach anything from the strategy added to Europeans, I don't think. But they will help us to develop the idea, is the position I'm taking.
Yeah.
But I believe that a mighty country like Germany needs Africa a lot.
Sure. That is, we are neighbors actually, Europe and Africa, and connected all over time of exploitation of a colonial system actually. So there's also kind of guilt, I think, and that is one point. But of course we are neighbors, and but I would say what you said. Of course you can teach also the Europeans, I think. I think that it would be also good sometimes, because we also have to be open-minded. We not only have to give you a space for this idea or for your kind of basic ideas and system what you presented here, but I think also Europe can learn a lot about from it. So that is always kind of
Thank you that you say that.
yeah, I think
it is not wrong.
Because I think because also in this point, to overcome this view that the European people or European system always sees itself as a standard. So, but it's not the standard. So,
Yeah.
and that is also the point when we do not break with these ideas, we will always kind of be in this strange hierarchy between Europe and Africa. And that's why we can learn, of course. We can learn from this ADI system. We can learn of this different kind of morality, different kind of citizenship and property rights and legal system. Actually, I think that is of course important also to of course it's more important now to spread it and to how to strengthen it within the Eritrean community, but it's also important to show it
That's
to
where you can
European
help us,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Because, and even if it's only that the people here understand it and also can and then support it, actually, I think that is the point. Freweyni, do you want to add something at the end? So because we are running out of time now.
Just a short comment. I think I see or I noticed a high interest and curiosity on your side, which means the more people get interested in this very different system from the European nation state system, we can exchange at least, if not learn from each other. And also we have a lot of diaspora Eritreans that need attention, that need support. We feel responsibility to do our best, but we need assistance, we need support, which means to deepen this issue also with the Eritrean community in the diaspora. It's the ADI system that brings people together of all sorts of diverse backgrounds they have. And many people I meet, they say, oh, the Eritreans are very peaceful people. It's beautiful to observe them celebrating this and that. But at the same time, those last days, we have read in the newspaper different descriptions of the Eritrean Jews or Eritrean diaspora. So that problem, without going too deep into that, we need to negotiate with each other, with the Eritrean community, but also with the European politicians, so that we can together look for solution. And I think if we can offer people space to come together in a trustful way based on those diverse locations of their background, their origins, and they can listen to the elders and they can learn, they can strengthen their identity, they can also become part of the solution. And at some point, people need representatives, and the government in exile is the highest form of representations that can be taken serious on a higher political level, because we need to take that at some point to Eritrea and to the Eritrean people also who are waiting for some support from outside. At the same time, I would like to say that we are only think tank group again, as Tagara Herui was saying. The election system, how to build the government in exile, how the representation is going to be, that needs to be discussed maybe next time.
Yeah.
Because people shouldn't get misunderstanding information. We are not the government.
Yeah,
we
sure.
want a government in exile to be built by the people, for the people.
Yeah, sure. I fully understand that, but we also should emphasize it at the end that, of course, the think tank is also kind of, you're only giving the idea that there should be created something in this way. So, but I think this is the right way, actually. So we had it actually also with Syrian people who create also kind of bigger alliance, which was not political, but which was an alliance to unite the people. And then now in the next step, they are creating political parties and so on and so forth. And I have a feeling this is the same process here. So you are giving the main or the major ideas to the people that first that there is a possibility to participate, to be a political active member for Eritrean society in exile, actually, and that then is a need for this government in exile, I think. And so the next step would be the next, hopefully the next, also maybe the next conference, maybe a bit more international, actually. That would be great to gather together, to have an assembly, also to discuss points, how it could look like, and maybe also to create an election system. And like you both of you said, Zoom and social media and all these technical tools are really great, because that leads to the situation that people can participate into elections maybe, or in these discussions, even if they are not in Germany, based in Germany, or in Europe, and do not have money actually to come here, but they can participate via Zoom. I think that is always nice today.